Welcome into Three True Values, our post-national championship episode. That's right. College basketball being played on the hardwood is over for the season, but that doesn't mean we don't have anything else to talk about because there's still plenty going on across the sport. That's right. We are going to break down the Final Four of the national championship, everything that happened throughout this season. We're going to talk about it all here in this show. Recap of what all you saw, what all you might have missed, and what it all means for the sport. And then we'll get just a little bit into the start of this coaching carousel. What does that all mean? Because it is still spinning. The Kentucky job is open, and that means that we've got one of the most high profile searches that you will ever see in this sport going on as we speak. So, without further introduction, let's just go ahead and get into it. We'll start here with the national championship game. UConn takes down Purdue. They are back-to-back national champions, the first time since Florida did it in 06 and 07. What a run by the Huskies. They were dominant from start to finish in every round of this tournament and every round really of last tournament. So this is 2 straight years that Dan Hurley and his team have proven that if you want to win the national championship, you have to go through the Huskies. I think that they're set up pretty well to be in contention again next year. You look at this team. What did they have? Donovan Clingan in the middle, a dominant force, somebody who really stepped up his game down the stretch in the last month or two of the season, improved steadily, and really became just a force on the defensive end, particularly. You saw what he did against Zach Edey. Sure, Edey put up 35 points, but I think it's important to note that while he put up 35, I had said earlier in the week, last week, talking with Andy Staples, that it wasn't about stopping Zach Edey. It wasn't about holding him to 10 points or whatever you might want to try to do. It was about Clingan making him an inefficient player in the post. And inefficient relative to his standard even was good enough to make things difficult for Purdue, and that was going to give UConn the advantage. He was able to hold Zach Edey to about 50% from inside, or I mean, that's the only place he shoots from. So 50% from the field until about 8 or 9 minutes to go in the game when he picked up his fourth foul. At that point, UConn already had a 16-point lead. And so, yes, down the stretch, when Clingan kind of went to the bench and then came back and was playing with 4 fouls, didn't really want to send him to the line. Then Zach Edey scored 15 points on 6 of 7 shooting in about a 8 or 9 minute span. Okay. But to that point, he was only shooting about 50%. He wasn't getting to the free throw line nearly as much as he would have liked. And Purdue was down 16 points. So Donovan Clingan, although I think he only got credited with 1 block, he impacted every shot just like he does with his size, his length, his athleticism. And I thought that he was a major piece of that game. Samson Johnson also gave them huge minutes off the bench at center. You knew that Clingan wasn't going to play the entire 40 minutes. He got up to 31 minutes. I thought that was good to see from him that he can go from that 20 to 30 range into that 30 to 40 range, even if he was on the lower end of it. It was good to see. But Samson Johnson came in for those remaining minutes, 5 minutes, 5 fouls. Yeah, he committed a bunch of fouls, but it felt like he was out there for longer than that because the impact that he made offensively, his ability to run, get up above the rim, finish plays, set screens and dive towards that basket, it was impactful. You could see what it was doing to that Purdue defense. And I felt like he had a real impact on the game despite 5 fouls in 5 minutes being his final stat line. So I think he's a guy who next season, if he comes back, you could build around that at the center of your lineup. You talk about some of the other pieces that may or may not come back. And then you look at what they've got on the bench that could develop next season. And you know that Dan Hurley is going to hit that transfer portal hard and get this team back up to where it was. This year's team was built in a very unique way. You had a 5-star freshman, you had a former top 50 recruit who sat on the bench and played a reserve role last season. And then you had a 2-year transfer, 2-year transfer. You had another grad transfer who came in. Caravan, somebody who had redshirted and now has spent 2 seasons. He may return. He may go to the NBA draft. We'll see what he decides to do in the coming weeks. But Dan Hurley pointed to earlier in the week something that I thought was very interesting. In the NIL era, in the transfer portal era, a lot of people will tell you you can't coach kids the way you used to. You can't coach them hard. You can't do anything to hurt their feelings or they're gone. But I think Dan Hurley has a much better approach, and it's not the easiest approach. And that's what I think people get in trouble with is they see the reaction and they say, look, I can't do it. See, because of this. And then they back out. Instead of finding a new way to do things. Because that's what Dan Hurley has done. Dan Hurley has said, look, I have to coach harder because I have to keep them accountable because now there's money involved. When there's money involved, there are expectations that you have to meet. Okay? Now, the NCAA is against pay for play, but it doesn't matter. If someone is investing money into something, then you, as the person receiving the money, should have an accountability, should have a sense of pride in what you are then returning to that person. That's the approach that Dan Hurley is giving his team. He is telling them, I have to coach you hard because with money involved, everyone has expectations. It's brilliant. It's brilliant to approach it in that manner. I think after he made that public, I think more coaches will start to take that approach. We'll see how it works. I do think that one thing that we have to step back and discuss here is I know that get old and stay old. That is the formula in college basketball. It really has been for most of history. We had the one and done era in the middle there where things got different. And so now everyone's having to readjust back towards this. And then with these new wrinkles of the transfer portal and NIL, you can keep a 5th-year, 6th-year senior in college if he doesn't have very many NBA prospects with NIL money. We're seeing a lot of centers, a lot of point guards in that realm. Other players as well, but those are the ones who become stars because of the way that college basketball is structured. So you look from there and you think, okay, these 6th, 7th, 5th, 6th, 7th year players, those aren't going to be around for very much longer. This is the last offseason in which the COVID rules impact anyone's eligibility. Any 5th-year senior beyond this point will have to be redshirted. Any 6th-year senior will have to have been redshirted and then received a medical waiver. Now, does that mean that there won't be any? No, because we've seen that the medical waivers often get approved. You can get a retroactive redshirt sometimes. There are different ways around it, but there's not going to be nearly as many of these players out there in the college basketball pool of talent. So when we talk about getting old, instead of talking about a 25-year-old, we'll be talking about a 22, 23-year-old. Now, that doesn't change the formula in that you want to get old and stay old. But when old is 25, you want as many 25-year-olds as possible. When old is 23, maybe you want a few of those and a few freshmen who are 4- and 5-star talents, a couple in the middle who are developing towards that path. Maybe that's a better formula. More balance is what you really need. So I think that this is still a work in progress here, what winning basketball rosters look like. But there's no doubt that right now, it looks like a bunch of guys using either their final year of eligibility or what would have been their final year of eligibility if not for the COVID year. Perhaps 1 or 2 4- to 5-star talents who are overachieving within the system led by those veteran players. That's what most of these dominant teams look like at this time, but it's all still changing. So let's see. Let's let it play out. These coaches are going to have to adjust again. They've got 1 year. This year, they know what they're doing. Next year, Maybe we see some of them adjust quicker than others, and that will determine which teams we see contend in 2025, 2026, that season, as we get further down the calendar. But it's time to put a little bow on this season, the 2023-2024 season, and talk about UConn from start to finish. They were up there. They were one of the best teams. Purdue as well. Houston don't want their early exit. Early, I say early, but it wasn't that early. It was Sweet 16. Their exit should not take anything away from them being in that upper tier with those other teams there. You know, Jamal Shed gets hurt. What are you going to do? It's difficult. But that really took them out of that game, I think, down the stretch. And on an already injury plagued team, a team that was struggling to find enough bodies to go out on the floor. You lose Jamal Shed, and it just wasn't going to happen against Duke, which had depth, some real depth with young guys and a couple of returning guys. That's going to be interesting to follow for Duke next season as well. But that group really separated themselves. But beyond that, I think that there was this wide open nature that we saw. We saw it play out in the conference tournaments. We saw Auburn win the SEC title. They were not the top team in the conference during the regular season. You saw NC State in the conference tournament and in the SEC, and in the NCAA tournament. You saw Oregon. They got healthy. They went on a run. They end up in the NCAA tournament field. It just goes on and on. Even in the Big Ten, you had Illinois win after Purdue won the regular season title. You had in the Big 12, Iowa State wins the conference title after Houston claims that regular season crown. There's so much in college basketball. There's so much parity because of the transfer portal. And I know that everyone worried early on that NIL and the transfer portal were going to take away parity. It was going to mean that Kansas and Kentucky got whoever they wanted. And I'm here to tell you they already were getting whoever they wanted. What this does is takes the guy who got recruited over at Kansas and Kentucky. Now he can go to a different school, have an impact there, get playing time there. The guy who is scoring 20 points per game at a small school, but his game clearly translates to a higher level. He can now help your school. So yes, there is far more parity near the top of the game of college basketball than there has been in quite some time, because you can take all of the top talent and try to put it onto one team. But you're going to need depth throughout the season too. And so if you've got three amazing players and two who probably would never have played at Kansas or Kentucky or wherever before, now they're a lot more beatable on a team in that second tier that has a couple of guys who transferred down from that top level of blue bloods, a couple who transferred up from mid majors. They were overachieving, and a couple guys who were at that level and always have been. Something to watch, something to continue to track, because it's not going away. Transfer portal, NIL, it's here to stay. It might take on new forms in the future, but for now, for next season, for this season, this is what we've got. And I think that it's led to a pretty good college basketball season overall. So we look towards next year now. What do we expect on the coaching carousel? We've already seen so many dominoes fall here. Not going to touch on all of them yet because we're going to do a coaching carousel special. But this storyline on how we got to an open Kentucky job is one of the craziest that you will ever see. So I just want to take you through it very quickly because it starts all the way back with the Pac-12 not getting a TV deal done. That's right. Kentucky's basketball job is open because the Pac-12 could not get a TV deal done. Because when the Pac-12 could not get a TV deal done, well, all the teams decided to bail. You saw Oregon and Washington join UCLA and USC in the Big Ten. You saw Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado head for the Big 12. That left Cal, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State to scramble for themselves. Cal and Stanford, because of their academic pedigree, end up in the ACC, which was scrambling because of what they saw happen in the Pac 12. They knew that some of their big teams, two of which are now suing the conference, Clemson and Florida State, were unhappy with their revenue sharing and wanted more money. They wanted out, but they wanted more money if they could not do that while they waited. So the ACC had to go try to add schools. They add Stanford, they add Cal. That way they can pitch the academic pedigree of this all. Even though we're talking about the Atlantic Coast Conference, and now we have two teams as far on the West Coast as you can get. Well, that still doesn't solve the issue necessarily for Florida State, Clemson, those other schools that are looking to get more money than what they already are. So then SMU makes a call. They offer, because they have big pockets, they have big donors, big boosters, they have lots of money flowing into that system. At least they can get it flowing into that system. If they prove to the fan base they are in the upper tier, they are no longer in this group below the best teams, below the best conferences. So SMU offers to enter without payment, meaning that they can give more money to these other schools that are unhappy. They can offset that balance. So SMU is going to take no money from this school. Well, SMU wants to come in. They want to make a big splash. They don't feel like Rob Lanier is the guy to do that, even though he's only had 2 years in charge. So they fire him and they go big fish hunting. They want to take somebody's coach who has done it in a power conference. They end up with Andy Enfield from USC. That's right. The USC coach left for the SMU job. Again, those donors, they have big pockets. They're ready to spend. They're ready to make a big time program. Build it from scratch because they can do that now through the transfer portal and through NIL. They have every opportunity to succeed there. Well, now USC is open and you look across in Arkansas. Eric Musselman is frustrated. There is a strained relationship between him and Hunter Yurachek. He's already kind of been feeling around whether there's an opening he could take in this cycle. Coming off of a bad year, doesn't want to have 2 in a row. So he's ready to leave. And suddenly, a job right in his area, Southern California, where he would love to be, comes open. So he takes off. Now, Eric Musselman is the coach at USC. Arkansas fans start building their big boards for who they would like to coach their team next. Chris Beard does not take it. Jerome Tang is not going to take it. And people start to wonder, who are they going to go get? Well, they end up going out and getting John Calipari, who is frustrated at Kentucky after the fans turned on him at the end of the season after another early exit from the NCAA tournament. So he decides that it's better off for everyone if he goes to a new place, gets a fresh beginning without knowing that the fans are on him and that he probably has 1 more year to turn it around. At Arkansas, he will have time to build that program. I mean, there's no one on the roster, so he's got to build the program from the ground up. And now the Kentucky job is open. So Kentucky is searching for a coach who is in that top tier of candidates. I thought there was always 4 names, maybe 5, who made perfect sense. You had Nate Oates. Well, Nate Oates puts out a statement very quickly. He's not interested. Jay Wright also put out a statement that he's not interested. I never considered him a candidate because he has made it very clear that he has no interest in any of these jobs. He wants to be on the CBS set and talk about college basketball. He does not want to coach college basketball anymore. So then the candidate pool gets trimmed down to Scott Drew from Baylor. Great choice. Dan Hurley from UConn, an amazing choice. And Billy Donovan, former Florida coach, former Kentucky assistant, now the Chicago Bulls coach in the NBA. There's complications there, though, because his season is still ongoing, and the Bulls are locked into the play-in of the NBA playoffs. So they can't get to him. They have no access to him yet. to hire him. He would not leave before the end of the season. So now Scott Drew turns down the job. He's not going to be in the mix, was not offered the job from what I've heard, but was asked to consider the job, basically. The semantics of all of this. He's going to stay in Waco. He's going to stay at Baylor where he has built something. Can't blame him there. So now we talk about Dan Hurley, who has made it pretty clear that he's not interested. But how much can Kentucky throw at him? Like how ridiculous of an offer can they make? And can that sway him to say, this is an opportunity that I just cannot turn down based on what they have offered me? Can they get into that territory? Because that's what they're going to try to do next. Then, of course, Billy Donovan. That'll be interesting. Does he want to come back to the college basketball ranks? Does he really have any interest in coaching college basketball today? He left college basketball to be in the NBA based on the way that college basketball was going. Now, it's a completely different landscape than it was when he left. Totally different. He could have success in this era, I think. But does he have any interest in it? That's going to be the question. So that's what you have to look for those candidates. And you wonder, well, what happens if both of them say no? Because it sounds like Hurley's leaning towards no. I wouldn't say it's a home run that Billy Donovan ends up the Kentucky head coach. I think at that point, you've got to go and you look at this next pool of candidates that includes Bruce Pearl and Brad Underwood. Now, I'm sure one or two other names would come in there, maybe a Chris Beard. But that's the next kind of pool, the next tier of candidates that are going to get in the mix here. And Bruce Pearl, I think, is very similar to Nate Oates, to Scott Drew, in that he has built something there. Like, that is his program at Auburn. Not sure he wants to walk away from that. So, I mean, the candidate pool is not huge already if you're the Kentucky job, because you've got to be someone who has the pedigree, the mentality, the track record. You've got to have everything to get that Kentucky job. So there's not a big candidate pool, but we'll see how it all plays out. They've got to get it done quickly because they've already lost a lot of their high school enrollees requesting their NLI releases, some decommitments. They're not going to land anyone in the transfer portal without a coaching staff. So Kentucky's got to move quickly here if they want to get this done. Meanwhile, John Calipari, with no coach at Kentucky, is free to now work on getting a lot of those recruits who were Kentucky commits, now are decommitted. He can convince them to come to Arkansas with him. Expect him to bring at least a few of those along the way. So there's plenty more to play out in this saga. Like I said, we're going to do a coaching carousel special. We'll break down the full carousel across all the high majors, maybe a couple of the mid majors in there, but mainly we'll focus on the high majors, who's where, what it means for college basketball, and plenty more right here on 3 True Values next time we talk to you. Thanks for listening. It's been an amazing 2023-2024 season. Look forward to continuing to talk to you throughout the offseason. Like I said, coaching carousel special. We'll have a transfer portal special at some point along the way as well. And then before you know it, previews will be back. We'll be talking college basketball once again. So thank you for listening to 3 True Values as we continue right here on 3 True Values with your host, James Fletcher.